Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we talk about the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. I'm your host, Sean Malone, the creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of Out of Frame, a video essay series on YouTube. Here today, as usual, with Paul Nelson, our head of social media and senior marketing manager, but you'll notice a new face with us today. Well, not a new face, a new voice with us today. Daphne Posadas is joining us in place of Jen Mafasanti because Jen is out today and Daphne wanted to come on and chat with us for a little bit. Daphne runs her own Instagram and TikTok accounts and a whole bunch of cool stuff with our Fee in Español program. And actually, I'll let Daphne sort of introduce herself a little bit. Daphne, how are you doing?
Hey, Sean. Hey, Paul. I'm doing great. And I think that's always a trick question, like when you have to describe yourself, because where do you start, right? Because you can start with what you do as a job, or you can start with what you like as a hobby, or you can tell people what you studied in university. So I'll just do a little bit of all three of them. So I studied international affairs and political sciences in Universidad Francisco Marroquín, which is the only liberty university. By liberty university, I mean that they literally teaches the principles of free markets, limited governments, and it's pretty cool because you get really the foundations of open and free societies from whatever professional point of view. So being there allowed me to get this cool insight of how the world work. And I'm just a very curious person, so I started talking a lot with my friends and my professors, and that got me a position in a radio show where I have been a radio hostess for 5 years now. Yep. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do. I try to welcome people into politics and into liberty ideas, and to understand what the world, try to understand what the world looks like today.
So this show, for most people who are regular listeners, although you'll probably have some fans and friends who join us, we typically talk about, much like Out of Frame, we talk about movies, and we talk about ideas in movies and TV shows and other bits of pop culture, and so like a lot of what we talk about sort of intersects with some of those things sometimes, but for the most part, we like actually having conversations about the content itself. Today, our goal was to talk about The Adam Project, which is the new Ryan Reynolds film. It's released on Netflix last Friday, I think it was. And so we'll get to that in a little bit. But Daphne, like, what are some of your favorite movies? Help the audience get to know you a little bit in terms of what you like watching and like what TV shows do you like and stuff.
All right. So definitely I have to tell people about my favorite sagas. And I know this is a personal one with Paul because I cannot understand Paul in this one. But I am a great Harry Potter fan. Like, I love Harry Potter. Those were the first books that I ever read growing up. So they have a special place in my heart. And of course, I watched the movie. So I love Harry Potter. And those are kind of like my comfort movies, kind of what I like watching on December 25th, staying in home, like with a hot cup of cocoa. So that's my comfort series. What I really love watching apart from movies is TV series. So I love Breaking Bad. I like Dark. We were talking about it at the beginning. I'm watching this really cool show called The Sopranos, which is this TV show that started airing when I was born. But
we've never heard of it before.
Yeah, but
no one's ever heard of The Sopranos.
I am loving The Sopranos. I think it has a lot of lessons. We should talk about The Sopranos someday.
That's actually, it's sort of a weird that you mentioned this, because YouTube, for some reason, YouTube has done, like, for the last 2 or 3 days specifically, has just recommended me like 18 different Sopranos clips. And I don't really know why.
You're gonna like this gabagool.
Yeah. I know.
I don't know. I was actually telling Matt Hampton today that I'm watching The Sopranos, and he said, "Why is everyone watching The Sopranos?" I have no idea.
See,
there
must be something going on right now. I'm not really sure, because, like I said, YouTube's recommending me just a million Sopranos clips. I don't know if everybody's just rediscovered it, if it got kicked up to the top of HBO Max's algorithm. I'm not really sure.
Taking it to the max. Now, I want to be clear about my Harry Potter stance because I'm not anti-Harry Potter, the books. On the other hand, the movies are bad. And I understand, like, I grew up with these movies and I was in the target demographic. Like, I was at the age where when the book came out, I was the age of I was the age of Harry Potter growing up. So the movies were there for that as well. And as they went on, I think they got worse. I know I'm like,
that's weird.
I know. I feel like most people think the other way, but the end of the trilogy just
filled with bad takes today, Paul. What's
going on? The right takes.
Of course, the books are better than the movie, but they're not bad movies. They're great. I especially love I especially love the Prisoner of Azkaban. I just love how they fly around Hogwarts and everything. Shout out to my Harry Potter fans out there.
Yeah. I think it's time for a remake, but I don't think we're going to get one.
It's time for
a remake.
I feel like it's a little early for that.
Is it though? It's been 20 years.
Since the first one, it's probably been about
or at least
but...
George Lucas those things and make this CGI better.
I mean, you definitely have a problem with, like, especially the first few movies. Man, I remember thinking, even at the time, that like the centaurs that show up and like Gorp, the Hagrid's like half giant brother or giant whatever he's half whatever it is giant brother. Like that guy looks so bad. And even like Voldemort's face on the back of Quirrell's head looked terrible. Like there's a lot of like those first like two or three. Alfonso Cuarón, I think changed it a little bit because I feel like he darkened the movies so much that like you could obscure some things. Yeah, that's Prisoner of Azkaban.
That's my favorite one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, but I will say this. I think Harry Potter benefits tremendously, as all movies have for many decades, from John Williams.
Yes.
I think those movies, absent John Williams, would not be very good comparatively.
Yeah. That is a correct take, Sean. And I guess I'm happy those movies exist just so we can get the main theme for Harry Potter, because it's a good one. Yeah. It's a good one.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
And I will actually tell you that one of probably my favorite single cue from the entire series came from Prisoner of Azkaban. It's called Buckbeak's Flight, and it is as you might imagine, it's when Buckbeak is first flying around, and that. Harry Potter gets to experience the thrill of being on Hippogriff for the first time. It's that score is fantastic. It's really, really excellent. But also J.K. Rowling's having a moment right now because she got in a Twitter fight with Vaush, which I don't know if you saw that or not, Paul, but
she is persona non grata in 2022. So
except for I think Vaush made himself look worse because she made the point, which I think this is a little bit controversial, I guess, as all of her points have been lately with respect to so I don't know, Daphne, if you're too familiar with like J.K. Rowling on Twitter and whatever, but
I know that she was canceled. I know she was canceled, but I don't know about that recent tweet.
Okay, so it's very similar to everything else, but the Labour Party in the UK put out a International Women's Day post, which basically the little video where they said that the Labour Party has been the champion of women for decades and decades, and that they're the party for women, and if you're female, you should vote Labour. But Rowling put forth a tweet because she is fairly notorious for poking at this subject at this point, but she said, well, the Labour Party can't even define the term woman. So what I should actually just pull up the tweet, because the tweet itself is pretty funny. But essentially, like, she was criticizing them for not being able to define the term, and then yet trying to get credit for for being the political champions of of women. And so Vaush, who you're probably not familiar with because outside of video game streaming and just like leftist Twitter, you probably wouldn't, or YouTube also, you wouldn't know him. But Vaush replied to J.K. Rowling, basically telling her to go in the kitchen and make him a sandwich. he said, normalize women shutting up challenge, I believe was his reply. And he is the progressive feminist, pro-trans, whatever character. Anyway, he went on a whole tirade about how she should just shut up and not say anything, not have an opinion.
Yikes.
So,
yeah, I missed that reply to that.
Yeah, it wasn't great. I'll pull this up because it's actually funny. And it really, to me, it really did not make him look very good at all because oops, I'm not going to do that right now. Hold on a second.
And also,
yeah,
I don't know, like, I don't know the whole movie. Like, I don't really know the guy, but you did mention that this guy has a different kind of like speech about women, about gender roles and stuff. And the fact that he's saying that as a joke really talks a lot about him as where his moral standards are. And it just reminded me because, like in Guatemala recently, the Congress and the government literally legalized, actually made illegal to be a homosexual in my country. Like literally,
Wow.
there cannot be homosexual couples, and families are only allowed to be mom, dad, and kid, and that's it. So
wait, hold on. So sorry, I just want to be clear. They made it illegal to be.
Yeah, they made it
okay,
illegal.
and it wasn't before.
No, it wasn't.
Wow, that's interesting. I mean, for the most part, I mean, I like coming from the United States standpoint, like I generally think of those kinds of things as always kind of going the opposite direction. Like the default is that it's illegal, and then slowly but surely it starts to open up and becomes legal for more people around
Right.
the world. That's wow.
Yeah, like what you're seeing in the rest of the world is the world becoming more and more open to, open societies. And in my country, they're literally rejecting it. So it's funny because a lot of the people in Congress, when they were arguing why they were voting in favor for this law, was because they were saying like, moral values and moral traditions. And, these are the people who first have no moral values and are trying to impose moral values on the rest of the society.
Yeah.
Like that kind of
Yeah.
hypocrisy seriously is very dangerous.
Yeah, I totally agree. I honestly, I think this is something that you see a lot though. Like Vaush is somebody who presents himself. So he's gotten into Twitter fights with Hannah Cox, who's a colleague of ours. Like he's, we actually had her, our first Rigged episode. She's replied to one of his YouTube videos. Or actually, it was a Vaush video that we did first, right? I think that was the
Second
first
thought.
video it was the second thought video. Never mind. Paul and I were going through different options to do, and Vaush is going to come up a lot on those kinds of things because he does, pro-socialist, pro-communist kind of content on YouTube, and but I just. Quite a lot of the time, I feel like we've seen cases where people who present themselves as champions for women or champions for gay people or whatever end up, if you let them talk long enough, they say things like this. You said, "Women be quieter and start apologizing," challenge was his response. And he also went back and forth with her in a few different tweets and stuff. And it was pretty, to me, it was a pretty bad look for him. His whole thing was like, J.K. Rowling doesn't want trans people to have any rights, which is not true. And it's not what J.K. Rowling has ever said. But, it's just, I don't know. It's just been interesting to watch because you watch people who are like, oh, women should have a voice until they say something that I disagree with, in which case, like all of the sort of sexist, most, aggressively sort of gendered insults come out, right? And I don't know. I mean,
you see
it's just
that
a weird
you see
thing.
that all the time too. Clarence Thomas is probably
yeah.
the one that comes to top of my mind.
Yeah.
That's pretty weird criticisms.
Yeah, all the people who are supposed to be champions of racial equality, if you don't agree with their position, suddenly they'll use all of the racially motivated insults.
Yeah, and in the end, you end up like really seeing their true colors. Like the tribal behavior, the collectivist thinking. Like how you have, whenever you tell me what tribe you belong to, I will attack the way I know how to attack that tribe, instead of like actually being able to debate or have a rational discussion with you. So I mean, that's the whole issue with cancel culture. Like whether you agree or not with the person who's saying something that you don't agree with, I mean, that's liberty of expression.
Yeah, totally. So so what's the mood like, I guess, in reaction to the law? I mean, what's your sort of, I mean, I assume your friends are probably upset about it, but like what's what are you getting a general sense from the society overall?
Yeah, so most younger generations are very open, and like you said, most of like generations like millennials and younger generations will, feel very. Yeah, I have been expressing anger through social media. As a matter of fact, on Saturday I went protesting. We went protesting and say, like this is not right. Like if there's somewhere the government doesn't need to be is your bed. They literally shouldn't be telling you who you can love or who you cannot love. So we went to protest. They also that law that they reform also changed like penalties for abortions, which made like miscarriages and illegal as well. Not abortions, like miscarriages. So if a woman had a miscarriage, then
how
you can go to jail for 3 years.
How can you make that illegal?
It's absolutely crazy. Like it's this is a law that's been in discussion for 3 years.
Going on?
We've been like people who have been following up on this law. We have been discussing this for 3 years. This is absolutely insane. We really didn't think that they were gonna make this go through, but they voted yes on actually International Women's Day, 8th of March. So
Wow.
as you can imagine, it really it made everyone feel like the government again, just trying to create another. Because I mean, why are they doing it right now, right? And so people are angry. But you mentioned something that it's like my generation, but then there's a large part of population who are very conservative, and they're saying that it's good that the government is doing this type of things.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm really sorry that's going on there, and I had no idea. We haven't talked about that at all, and that's the kind of thing that doesn't really filter into like American news sources for the most part. So it's not something that you hear about, but it does really highlight the difference in the kinds of fights people are having in different parts of the world. Right. I mean, it's pretty amazing sometimes how much people in the United States get really myopic about and including, in our own, like me and Paul probably, just guilty as anybody in terms of seeing that like the big, fight for liberty or whatever is about this issue or that issue. And like, a lot of times it's pretty easy to forget that a lot of other parts of the world, are having much different fights in that regard. And so that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I like to keep talking about, because the president said, "Oh, we're not gonna go ahead with this law," but nothing has been done really to remove this law from effect. Like formally, there has not been an action done in order for it to be illegal, because
I also I don't understand, like, if you have a law that you're not planning on enforcing, the law shouldn't exist, right? Like it's too, law as a concept is too dangerous to just have things on the books that you could enforce at will and just choose not to. Like that does not does not make sense. And it makes for a very corrupt, or at least the opportunities are there to use the law in a very corrupt way, which is not great. But man, I don't know. So actually, Daphne, why don't you tell people where they can find you outside? Because, you know, Jen will be back next week probably, and people probably want to follow you and track you on Twitter and TikTok and wherever else.
Oh, sure. You can find me on all of my socials as at Daphne Posadas, and you write that as Daphne Posadas, like Christmas in Mexico, Posadas. I always say that.
We'll put that in the links and description as well. But
yeah, I always say that because out of a habit, because people always say weird things as my last name for some reason, even in Spanish. So I will say like Mexican Posadas, and they get it.
Awesome. So yeah, we set out to talk about the Adam Project. So let's get into that a little bit. But Paul, I'm going to start with you because I feel like you have such a harsh take. So Paul, explain to us, what is the Adam Project?
The Adam Project is Ryan Reynolds got a big old paycheck from Netflix and an interesting elevator pitch. What if we had Ryan Reynolds go back in time to his 10-year-old, 12-year-old self to save the world? I mean, sign me up. On paper, this sounds great. And that's basically the story. There's a dead dad. The Hulk is the dead dad.
It's going to be a problem, by the way, like MCU actors playing other roles in the same film together is getting confusing because now we're like Gamora and the Hulk and Deadpool all show up in a movie together.
But we can't talk about it.
Well, we can, but they probably can't or shouldn't. Yeah. Although I don't know, I think Ryan Reynolds. I don't know if you're paying any attention to the fact that his studio, Maximum Effort, is advertising the film as well, of course, and they've already done some. I'm sure that he's going to do some Hulk and Deadpool content to promote the film.
Yeah, but a little more serious. More of the synopsis. If you couldn't tell, I'm being pretty sarcastic. Spoiler alert, I hated this movie. But the synopsis is basically we start the movie with Ryan Reynolds escaping in a jet in 2050. And at that point, they've invented time travel, and he was able to jump back to 2022, where he went to visit his 12-year-old self, who we had learned by this point that his father has died and is just kind of lost adrift, getting picked on by bullies. He's smaller than everyone else. And so they meet up and, hilarity, quote unquote, ensues. I mean, growing from a little scrawny little kid to Ryan Reynolds, I don't know, it doesn't really track for me. But anyways, they figure out that they need to.
It's aspirational, Paul.
Yes. Yeah.
Anything.
Right. An HGH. But so they figure out that their father, who has died in 2018, was the godfather of time travel. So then they had to make a jump back to 2018, the good old days, and talk to Mark Ruffalo, who is their dad, who also, none of this makes sense. Like, it just, biologically speaking, Mark Ruffalo, Jennifer Garner, ending up with Ryan Reynolds. None of this makes sense. I don't know. But, and basically what they figure out is
you're choosing not to suspend disbelief on weird stuff in this.
Because it gave me a lot of time to think about the weird stuff because there was nothing else to it. But they basically figure out that the business partner of Mark Ruffalo is evil, and she's a big bad business lady, and she is taken over, and she's not giving the government the technology, and she's just gonna do evil things, and the environment is dying and dead, and I
think if you can't guess that Catherine Keener is gonna be evil in a movie at this point, you've probably not been paying very much attention. I feel like she's now typecast herself as like evil business lady. But yeah, look, I disagree on your overall take. I thought the movie was pretty fun and enjoyed the movie a great deal, and thought it was like, honestly, like a pretty entertaining time in general. I thought, like, overall, the plot, the character interaction, all that stuff worked for me. I thought, like, most of that worked pretty well. I don't really have a big problem with that. The story doesn't make any sense. And honestly, like, if the thing that would annoy me more than probably most of the stuff that probably annoyed you is the idea that time travel, like, the genie cannot be put back in the bottle. Like, they literally use that line, like Ryan Reynolds says, we're going to put the genie back in the bottle. You can't. If you invent a piece of technology, I always think that this is funny, by the way, the idea that you blow up the machine and then that's the end of it, as if the important thing was the physical machine and not the ideas that made the machine possible. The ideas exist. And yeah, it's on a hard drive or whatever. But I mean, like, if it can be done, it can be done. There are certainly other people out there who are going to figure it out. Like, once that's the case. So I never find that to be very believable. And in particular, I think that the whole idea of, like, we have to uninvent a tool because it gets used badly is it's like a poor answer to a misused tool, I feel like. But so that maybe annoys me more than anything. The bad business trope is par for the course at this point. Like, I mean, every movie you will ever find at this point. I mean, I've been rewatching, sorry, this is totally a tangent. I've been rewatching Rebels, Star Wars Rebels, sort of slowly, just because my wife has never seen it before. And I think I mentioned this on the last podcast. I've been listening to the Thrawn trilogy, the Star Wars Extended Universe stuff. And it's not personal, it's just business comes up in Star Wars Rebels multiple times. Like, this is just such an overused trope at this point. But Daphne, what was your take on the Adam Project since you watched it?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with Paul, like yourself, Sean. I agree with you, Sean, but I disagree with Paul because, seriously, I feel like this movie is a nice movie to watch, like, for a family fun moment. You just want to watch something on a Saturday night or on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon. You just watch it, and it's a cool movie to watch. It was kind of boring, but it was cool to watch. It was not one of those movies, I will say, it was not one of those movies where you have, like, a great cast and then it's a horrible movie. I forgot the name with the Jennifer Lawrence.
Jennifer Garner.
Jennifer Garner.
Are you talking about the?
No, Jennifer Lawrence.
Well, wait. You're talking about
movie
which?
That was out a couple of
boy.
weeks ago. The most watched Netflix movie of all time. I literally forgot the name.
Oh, like Don't Look Up, for example. Don't Look Up is probably the one.
Yeah, that's
where
it.
It's got like an enormous, like a huge cast, like ultra famous cast, and
yeah, like, exactly. But I think this was not one of those movies. I think, like, you have great,
I agree,
great artists: Jennifer Garner, Zoe Saldana, Mark Ruffalo, Ryan Reynolds, and I think the movie is fair enough. And the story is a nice story. Maybe it was a little cheesy sometimes.
Yeah,
but it was cool. I think I have nothing
in general, I feel
cheesy.
like this story. Yeah, I feel like in general the story is, like, relatively sweet, and I liked a lot of aspects of it.
What was sweet about it? What was sweet about it? There was throwaways. There was nothing sweet about it.
Okay,
Mark Ruffalo he was a bad dad, but he played catch. No, he's bad.
He did play catch, Paul.
Then that meant nothing to me.
Playing catch with your boy is the universal good dad symbol. You have to accept it as it is. No, look, in general, I think, but I'm not defending the movie on the basis of, like, this is the greatest movie of all time. But what I'm saying is that, like, as far as as far as being, and I think Daphne actually sort of put it in a way that I would probably put it, which is like, this is pretty rewatchable for me. Like I could watch this again and like put it on and enjoy what was happening, and it would be fine, and I would not have any major problems with it. And the other thing I would point out, so I'm going to reference Dan Murrell for a minute. I don't know if you guys know who Dan Murrell is. Dan used to be on Screen Junkies movie fights, and then he eventually split off and started his own channel and whatnot. And Dan called this an actual 4-quadrant movie, which I think is true. So for those who are not familiar with the term, 4-quadrant movie refers to a movie that would be okay to watch not okay, but like something that people who are young, old, male, and female could all watch together and have a decent time. I think this is generally true. Now, Paul, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's like it's too dumb for a 14-year-old. I don't think so. I think this would be. Yeah. I think this would be fun.
This is rare for me. I rarely find myself thinking that looking at because now on Netflix you have the option when you're on a phone, you could watch stuff in double speed, and you could speed it up. I was watching on my Apple TV, and this is the first time I've ever tried to get that option, and I couldn't find it on Apple TV. So I sat through the full thing. But my gosh, I hope we invent time travel so I can go back in time and tell myself not to watch this movie.
All right, so it was kind of boring. Like I agree with you. It was kind of like boring because like it was very predictable. Instead of boring, I would say predictable. Is a better adjective.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's like maybe it gives you a feeling like it's a slow movie, but overall it's a nice movie, and it is a sweet movie. Like I like taking notes, so I literally wrote down one sweet moment when like older guy, middle-aged guy is talking to his 12-year-old self, and like the little kid is telling him like he should stop blaming his dad for being dead. He loved him. His dad was a good person with him as a kid, so he shouldn't feel angry about that. And he said one quote that I think it was very sweet, and at the same time it could teach you some lessons on the world that we're seeing today. And it is easier to be angry than to be sad, right? Because his whole issue was that his middle-aged self was an angry person, so he decided to do a lot of things based on anger. So when you accept sadness, you allow yourself to be sad, and then you can evolve the situation, right? But it's easier to be angry than sad. And it reminded me a lot of like political discussions today are usually because it's easier to be angry than to be sad about the way society has gone, or about where the political debate has gone, or about where the world has gone. Like, it is easier to be angry about the war than to be sad about the war. Like, most people are out there trying to find guilty people about the war, and when you're angry and when you're trying to find guilty people, that's what happens. You lock yourself up, and you are not able to solve situations.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely agree. I think where this movie lost me though is that didn't show me how Ryan Reynolds got so jaded, because the 12-year-old kid is the one that's saying that, like, dropping that knowledge, which, yeah, definitely true. But it never, like, he kind of hints at things got worse, but the dude's a fighter pilot jumping through time. And it just, all the premise and stuff made sense, and I was on board, but it just, the execution was just lacking.
I don't think that Ryan Reynolds, like, adult version, Ryan Reynolds' character was meant to have a bad life necessarily. I mean, honestly, I think the worst thing that happened to him obviously was his wife being, possibly murdered, or, whatever. So, like, he, the reason, Paul didn't say this at the beginning, so, like, the reason that he jumped back in time in the first place was because his wife, who was also part of the program of, I don't know if they're test pilots or whatever, but they're pilots who run these sort of time jumping ships, went back in time and then didn't come back. And so his initial motivation was to go find her, and he knew that she jumped to 2018. And then he got shot while he was taking the plane and whatnot, so he didn't go to the right place. He ended up going to 2022 instead. I don't know. I maybe again, Paul, maybe that's just part of the premise. I mean, I can't fault that as a premise. I think that's a pretty good premise to start from. I think and maybe you're right. I mean, that like as far as like an elevator pitch goes, like this movie works better than it actually did. But I think you're being like way harsh, because like I think you said this in our conversation before the show. But like you said this was worse than Uncharted, which I can't even believe.
Might have been a little
hyperbolic.
Can't even
believe you would say that.
Maybe not worse, but this movie actively made me angry. Uncharted was just like, okay, whatever. There's nothing there.
I feel almost exactly the opposite, because Uncharted, I don't know. Maybe Uncharted didn't make me angry because why?
Yeah, I think I had too high of expectations for this, because the premise hooked me right away. The idea that Ryan Reynolds, like time travel, interesting sci-fi for kids, like there hasn't been a lot of that in our movie going society, and it was something different. And I like things that are different. And then it was just paint by numbers in the worst possible way.
Yeah.
And just also some of it was too Netflixy. I really have I think it might just be Netflix content that I have a hard time with. It was just too long in weird places. It was almost, what was it, an hour 50? And I'm thinking
like an hour 50.
I think 90 minutes in and out. The story's simple. That's good. Just in and out, 90 minutes, make it tighter.
So that's true. I think that the movie as is could have been shorter, although I would say I would have been more interested. I think where the movie falls down, and this would be my big criticism, and I think you're going to agree with this in general, which is like, I think the dad relationship wasn't as good as it needed to be to justify a lot of the other stuff. And part of that is really because we don't meet or get to know anything about Adam's dad until or I guess Reed, whatever. We don't get to know about Mark Ruffalo's character until we meet him in person, pretty much. Like, we're told a few things about him. We know that he's dead. We know that that Jennifer Garner's character is sort of struggling, and that we get that part of it just because we understand the social cues aspect of it. But what we don't really know is who he was or what he was like, or there's no scenes of him. Like, the movie could have probably benefited tremendously from maybe instead of starting with an action sequence, starting with a loving dad spending time with a kid sequence, right? And I would make the comparison to something like Guardians of the Galaxy, where like just having that first 8 minutes or so where it's just about Peter Quill and his mom, and then his mom dies, and that gives you what you need to understand that character for the rest of the time. Like, you understand that he ran away at a critical moment. He's going to live with that forever because he was taken off the planet. I think you could see that in this case. Like, if they had done something where it was like, okay, he's a really good dad, and also he happened to be this great scientist. But like, at the beginning, we don't even need to know that, really, right? Like, it's more important that he's a good dad. I think that would have played a little bit better. But all in all, I don't have as big a problem with that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I agree with both of you. I agree that this was an overly large movie. I mean, 150 minutes, I think it lasts, and it was too much, definitely. Now that you mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy, it does give me kind of Guardians of the Galaxy vibes. Like, main character who's a hot guy and, has a nice wife. Actually, Zoe Saldana is in both of those movies. So,
same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And I didn't know where familiar it was, but now that you mention it, that's where it is.
Here's an totally random thing, by the way. Zoe Saldana spelled her name with a tilde in this movie, and I don't recall ever seeing that before. Saldana, which I don't think I've ever seen her spell it that way before, but in the credits for this movie, She spelled it with a tilde over the N, which I am now curious about a little bit. I don't know if that was always a thing and she just didn't do it because it was easier for American audiences to like not, have a weird character over, part of her name or whatever. I'm not really sure, but
oh yeah, I mean, I just like looked it up and it says Zoe Saldana claims manager discouraged her from using her real name.
There you go.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that. I hadn't noticed that before.
Yeah, it was in the end credits, and I don't think I've ever seen her use that spelling before. So
yeah, I missed it because I was out of the Netflix so quick. That is interesting.
Here's another thought, and I don't know if you got that hint, like how the whole break, like one of the main rules about time traveling, and it's not like I'm a geek for time traveling movies. I know I've seen some movies, some series about this, but I'm not like a huge fan and looking into all the theories. So I know a fair amount of time traveling. But I know like one of the main rules for time traveling is you don't get seen, you don't interact with other people. And at the beginning of the movie, I was like thinking, why is this guy talking to himself? Like why does he keep telling all of this information? And then there's this, they tell you eventually in the movie, they tell you that like he needs to tell this kid because he needs him, but also hints that he's willing to break the rules because of love, because he's trying to go back to his wife. So what are your thoughts on that?
I have pretty strong feelings about time travel logic, actually, especially in movies. But I do not like. So the kid actually, when he first introduces the fact that he's him from the future or whatever, he sort of spells it out. So like there's two theories. There's sort of like the multiverse idea where like if you go back in time, like your timeline splits off from some other timeline that you would have had or whatever. Or paradoxes get created. I don't think, like, my favorite time travel movies and my favorite time travel stories are more mystery stories than anything, because I don't like the idea of, or really believe in the idea of sort of splitting off multiple timelines. I think that if you go to your own past, you become a part of your past. And so whatever happens already happened in the past, and therefore you can't actually change anything. Like you couldn't go back and change something about the world. That would be my position, because anyone who did, time travel back to do that would have already done so. It already happened. It happened the way that it happened, etc. And so the stories that are really interesting to me are ones that take advantage of that idea and find ways to weave in. Actually, Harry Potter is a perfect example of this, come to think of this. So in Prisoner of Azkaban, going full circle back to Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, there's a whole plot that I will say to Rowling's discredit, she does not return to at any point, where Hermione has the power of time travel, right? She has this time turner. She can go back a few hours or whatever and do whatever she needs to do. The thing that I love about the way that's written is that she becomes, and Harry and Ron all become, Harry and Hermione become a part of their own past. So all of the things that happened earlier in the film, like Harry getting hit in the face with like a rock and like hearing what he thinks is a werewolf and, running around, all that kind of stuff, is actually him from the future doing all this stuff to himself, right? I love that, because if you do that well, it weaves in a mystery that you're setting up all these clues that can pay off later, which I think is a more interesting story. Because if you don't do that, then time travel is a way to it's sort of anything goes. Like you can change whatever you want or not, or it creates arbitrary rules, or there's all kinds of weird stuff like that. And I don't like that. I much prefer stories where the time travel is something that you have to accept as like, these things already happened. And then once you do that, you can weave them into your story a little bit better. Not a lot of films take that approach though. And I think partly this is Well, I don't know. Partly, I wonder if it's just because Back to the Future set a completely different precedent. Terminator set a completely different precedent. It's also like a good what if story to say, like, what if we changed the past and see what happens in the future, and we can see a different society. But logically, I don't like it. So I much prefer movies that treat that better. And actually, I think The Adam Project would have been better if that was actually in effect. If Ryan Reynolds knew that he wasn't going to be able to change the past and thus modify his present in any way, but that by going back in the past, he set something in motion that was important, that had to happen for his own life. For example, that he would never have known that his father was part of this program and maybe would have never been part of it himself, something like that. I don't know. I mean, just other ways of looking at it. But obviously this movie kind of takes a different approach and suggests that he can, in fact, change the future.
He can stop the rising tides and the eventual devastation that climate change will bring.
I mean, that, to be fair, that wasn't really his motivation at all. It's sort of Mark Ruffalo's motivation, but that feels like Mark Ruffalo inserting Mark Ruffalo into the movie a little bit.
Can I say one
Daphne, you're muted if you're...
I was talking and everything, and I was like, why are you interrupting me, Paul? Yeah, no, like all this idea about, like, there's this quote I wrote that I think it would be interesting for us to discuss. It says, mankind tampering with the forces, with the mechanism of universe. There is something that is greater than science. And I am thinking, like, when I heard this, I'm thinking this has got to be moral thinking. And he indeed talks about ethical boundaries to science. And it reminded me a lot of what we're dealing with today with COVID, 2 years after the first cases were announced.
Yeah, it would, except for like Mark Ruffalo and probably everybody associated with the movie is probably perfectly fine with zero ethical boundaries to using science as a justification for reshaping people's lives and whatever. I don't know. It is interesting to me, like, what people put those kinds of boundaries on and what they don't, like where they see a role for humility and trying to limit the power of experts and whatnot to make decisions on other people's behalf and what, versus like where they wouldn't. And I think similarly, Mark Ruffalo, sorry, I'm putting all of this on Mark Ruffalo. It's probably not his fault, but like somebody like that would probably be perfectly happy with overriding as many individual decisions as he thought it was necessary to stop climate change and whatnot. But of course, when it comes to something that didn't do that, he would put ethical boundaries on it. So I tend to see that kind of quote as a little disingenuous, especially coming from Hollywood. Like it often feels like people who are really, just saying, oh, here are the ethical, moral boundaries when it serves our purpose. And then when it doesn't, no holds barred, right? We'll do whatever we want. But I don't know. I mean, I like the quote though. I didn't really like how that was used that much though in the movie, because dude, you invented time travel. Like, if you invented time travel, if you understand that time travel is going to be a thing, you understand that you can't control it being used in ways that you don't want, right? There's no way to control that. There never would have been any way to control that.
Also the thing with unintended consequences, like there is a scene when middle-aged guy and 12-year-old guy are talking with his dad, and he's like, oh, I just did it because I didn't think about what could happen afterwards. It was just like a sample project or something like that.
Right.
And unintended consequences, the world ends. But I mean, like, every decision we take, especially when it's like that important and when there's power involved, it definitely can transform lives.
Yeah.
I also, I think the thing that really upset me the most about this movie. And then I'm going to finish with something nice about a part of this movie. But what just misses, and this missed from the first scene when he's flying out, and it's like this beautiful vista. Earth looks beautiful. There's bright city lights, and he's flying into space. I'm like, this looks awesome. This is the future. This looks great. But from that point onward, we are told, never shown, that the future is terrible, that nothing is right, and it's all because of this one bad woman. And there's never any payoff to that. So I am left to take the word of an extremist who probably is lying. I don't know. I have no reason to believe him other than he's Ryan Reynolds and he looks like Ryan Reynolds. So I guess you can believe him on that. Cut him some slack. But
he's the protagonist. He's the handsome protagonist.
Right.
Well,
so I think
believe him.
What you said too, Sean, about the father-son relationship, it wasn't poignant enough to make this movie work. But also, you needed to show the future being terrible. But the only time they showed the future, it didn't look terrible, even though it was from, so many thousands of feet. But the nice thing I wanted to say, and I just kind of want to. I've really been. I didn't like anything about this movie except this part, and that's Jennifer Garner. Her performance as the mom. She was
great.
Phenomenal. It was the most grounded part of this movie, and the best scene in the entire movie is when Ryan Reynolds, her grown-up son, is talking to Jennifer Garner at a bar, and she doesn't know, obviously, that this is her son, and it is really, really emotionally well done. And that's pretty much it for that.
Sweet movie.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing where I was saying it was sweet, but I would also say that I think more scenes like that, particularly at the beginning, would have done really well. I think a scene like that with the dad, but with the boy version, right? Yeah. Something like that would have been really nice. And then actually something like that would have been nice because then it could have paid off later, right? Like dad has a heart-to-heart with the son. 3 decades later, son has a heart-to-heart with the mom, and they're sort of parallels, and that works. I mean, that would have been nice. I would have liked to have seen that. I mean, look, there are definitely things that I would have done a little bit differently with this movie, but all in all, I thought it was mostly pretty fun, and the action beats were pretty good. It reminded me of something that I can't quite put my finger on. I want to say this is going to be a weird poll because it's not like a very well-known movie, but it reminds me of I think the Disney version. Well, they're both Disney. Sorry, not the Disney version, but the like more recent version of Escape to Witch Mountain or like Race to Witch Mountain. I think they had a different name for it for the sequel or whatever. But so that one had The Rock in it. I don't know. There's something about that because a lot of the movie just had a lot of like chase sequences and well, honestly, some of it may just be Pacific Northwest and setting and just being in around Mount Rainier, which is, by the way, where I kind of grew up when I was little. A lot of what you guys saw in that movie is where my parents live now, or pretty close to where my parents live currently. They're about an hour and a half from Mount Rainier, I think.
Oh, that's nice.
Gorgeous area, but also a little unrealistic. I feel like the house in the middle of the woods. It was like almost a magical cottage, a magical modernist. Just very, very nice for a college professor.
I mean,
I had a lot of questions.
Unclear.
Yeah, and talking about like movies or series that talk about time traveling and have weird cabins or houses that look like magical houses. If you guys have watched Dark, the movie, they also have like a very weird vibe house. Like I remember feeling like it was a very weird vibe house, but then I thought, this is an European series, so I don't know.
Well, cool. So Daphne, what we usually do when we kind of wrap up the discussion of the episode is, or the discussion of the movie for the main episode, is we give it a rating. We've been rating movies on a star system. Paul, Jen, and I each have one star to give out, and 3 stars maximum is the rating system. You can apportion the star however you want. It could be half, it could be a quarter, it could be whatever you want it to be. I have a feeling I know where Paul's going to go, so I'm going to start with Paul.
I don't think this will surprise anyone, but no stars for me.
No stars.
Missed on the premise, and unfortunately, not everything can be the Batman. So, yeah.
All right.
Oh my God, I didn't like the Batman.
Stay tuned for the extra episode.
Yeah. Actually, I'll tease that real quick, Daphne, while you're thinking about your rating. For those who are not familiar, we'll stick around and do a bonus episode that's available for supporters on Patreon and Subscribe Stars. So if you're a supporter of the show, stick around, of course, and we'll have some more content for you. Probably answer some viewer questions, or maybe we'll just we'll get Daphne's take on the Batman, which would be pretty interesting at this point. But for everybody else, consider if you like the show, if you like Out of Frame, consider supporting us on Patreon or Subscribe Star at patreon.com/Out of Frame Show or subscribestar.com/Out of Frame Show, and then you can get access to bonus podcasts as well. But with that said, Daphne, what's your rating for the Adam Project?
All right, just before I say something, I'm just gonna say Batman really gave me those Tobey Maguire vibes in movie number 2, where he's like all weird because he's all like
Spider-Man 3. Actually, I think is
it Spider-Man?
Talking about like bad Spider-Man where he goes dancing.
Yeah, exactly, that one. It gave me those vibes.
Yeah.
Yeah, my rating is 0.6 stars.
Ooh, 0.6. We've never had a 0.6, but I'll take it.
Okay,
it's interesting. All right, I'm gonna give a full star to this movie. I'll give 3/4 of a star to this movie because I feel like there are definitely things that I would want to do differently, but I also feel like it deserves a little bit more love than the panel has given so far, because it was fun and it was enjoyable and it's light family entertainment that doesn't take itself too seriously and it has a good time. And makes a lot of Ryan Reynolds type jokes. I think Ryan Reynolds is exploring the possibility of PG-13 jokes.
This is not why Ryan Reynolds was created. The point of Ryan Reynolds is that you have a leading man that'll say this absolutely ridiculous stuff. That's the whole point of his shtick. And don't change it. Don't change it.
We're gonna find out. All right. That's it for our discussion of the Adam Project. Daphne Posadas, thank you so much for joining us. Daphne's going to stick around and talk to us on the bonus episode as well. But hope Daphne, actually give your Twitter and your Instagram, or however you want people to contact you or to follow you on social media. Let them know one more time, please.
Sure. Thank you, Sean, for having me. Thank you, Paul, for having me as well. I mean, I did enjoy a lot this conversation. Something that people don't see me discussing as much as I would like to is talking about books and movies. So, I mean, talking about this was really great, even though it may not have been the greatest movie of all time. But yeah, if you can follow me. I mean, it's nice. It's fine. It's a fine movie. So watch the movie. Anyways, you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok as @Daphne Posadas, and we'll follow each other.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Be sure to leave a review and a rating if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Play or whatever. The ratings and reviews definitely help us get boosted in the algorithm, and we'd love to start seeing more traffic on some of these things as well. So share this podcast with your friends if you enjoyed it. Definitely check out Out of Frame on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, the whole deal, and subscribe to us on YouTube if you have not done so. For everybody who's a Patreon or Subscribe Star supporter, stick around. We'll do our bonus episode right after this. For everybody else, thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.